Okay, hello there, Pixel Pushers. Thanks for joining us for once again for another Affinity photo tutorial for the desktop app. We've done a couple recently for the iPad, so we're going to go back to the desktop and we'll look at something called color grading. Now, color grading sounds fanciful, it sounds complicated, and of course it can be, but equally it can be quite easy to understand what is color grading, and secondly what and how to apply it using Affinity Photo. So I'm going to do just a short few minute video on explaining how you can apply a color grade across an image to help unify different elements that have come together to make a composite, or to make an image give it a different period or flavor or feel or look to it, very simply by putting over a color wash, but without desaturating the original colors. So first of all, where does the term color grading come from, and what does it mean essentially? Well, color grading basically has come into the mainstream in the last 20 years since the advent of digital editing tools for film, for television, and now for photographs as well. And of course, home videos and YouTube videos and digital videos per se. A lot of these tools are built into filters and other apps and programs, but to control your color grading, you really need to understand how to apply it from scratch with the tools built into Affinity Photo, and that's what we're going to demonstrate today, very easily, really. And but color grading goes back pre-digital to emulsion and chemicals and the analog film days. So a film would be shot on different stocks, different film stocks supplied by Kodak or Fuji or whoever, and those stocks wouldn't always match. The lighting wouldn't match. Some were shot indoors, some scenes were shot outdoors on different days, and a typical film, and it goes for television as well, but a typical film would be shot over 2 months or 3 months. Weather conditions might not be the same. The internal lighting conditions might vary. So what you then get is a whole range of clips or dailies that don't match from a color point of view, a color temperature point of view, a white balance point of view, and an overall feel. And a given sequence or a given film might require a particular color treatment to it, and therefore to make it consistent either for a sequence, a scene, or indeed a location or the whole film, color grading was done by specialists in the lab at the direction of the director and cinematographer, photochemically, by changing the temperature, the chemicals, the duration, the time frame of the film being developed, and then the prints being developed from the negative. So all of that was a long-winded process. So essentially, that was color grading, grading the color from one scene to the next, from one shot to the next, so there was a consistency or there was a control on what the outcome was. And by and large, that was done really well. Expensive, time consuming, but it also went wrong. And I'm sure you've seen films in the past at the cinema, and then they've made their way to home video, where the color timing has been off, or on that particular print it was off, and you notice it. So with digital, the process is more involved, but a lot faster and a lot easier and a lot simpler to control from start to finish. So let me show you a couple of examples from movies. And this is a film, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, from about 20 years ago. And I do believe it holds the distinction of being the first film to be extensively color graded digitally. And it wasn't shot digitally, but it was color graded digitally, and it had a what we call a digital intermediate or a DI stage. That's commonplace now for everything, but back in the day it wasn't, and the whole film had a very autumnal brown color scheme to it, and this is an image from the film, and it's been color graded. Okay, because if you look at their costumes, their outfits, clearly those whites should be white, and but they've got a bit of a brown, warm tinge to it, and the back of his neck there has as well. Okay, and there's another shot here, and again it's got that sort of a sepia tone, or golden autumnal feel to it. So you expect that in the faces, but you certainly don't expect that in the white tiles in the background. But it is there because that was the look that the Coen brothers wanted to get for this particular film. Great film, by the way, well worth watching. Very funny. George Clooney is fantastic in it, as indeed the other actors. But then on the flip side, a more it's not a recent film. In fact, it's older than Oh Brother Where Art Thou. This is from 23 years ago, nearly. The original Matrix from 1999, and that clearly you can see has got a color grade on it, and it's predominantly green, and that was the look of the film because of the way the text appeared on the screens in the film, and so they followed that through with the color grading on pretty much the whole film. So this would have been done traditionally, using traditional analog techniques. So how do we do that? Here's a photograph of my uncle, actually, on his farm in Pakistan. So a shout out to him. He's doing fantastically well at his grand old age. But this particular photograph, it's just authentic looking colours. But let's say because he's wearing, and I chose this photograph because he's wearing very traditional, relatively old-fashioned clothing. There's nothing there to give it away. Possibly the little building in the background, but to give it away that it's in the modern era. That could easily be 100 years ago. It could easily be 200 years ago, or even 300 years ago in that part of the world. Because he's not wearing a watch, he hasn't got any spectacles on. Certainly, there's no gadgetry about. There's nothing there that could tell you that was in the in the 2000s. But of course, this was just taken a few years ago. But the first thing we want to do is to punch up the existing colours, and the quick way of doing that is duplicate the layer, change the blend mode of those layers, and you've seen these on other videos, and change it to either overlay, soft light, or hard light. I think I'm going to go for soft light. Now you notice it's making the skin tone a little bit dark, but we can reduce the effect of that down a little bit just by reducing the opacity of that effect of doubling up the layer and changing the blend mode a little bit, and that's fine. Okay, so that's our starting point. Okay, that could be a print, an image that you would keep as is. That's without any color grading on it. Now, if we want to apply a color grade, there's a number of ways to do it, and I will be exploring other methods, but this is a way that you may not think is obvious. So what we want to do is add an adjustment layer, and there's a number of adjustment layers obviously in there, and what we want, this is a little bit counterintuitive, is a gradient map. So when you click on gradient map, you'll have some presets in here, and I'm going to go for this default one, but it doesn't matter which one you choose because we can make adjustments to, we can change things. So just move this over here. Now clearly this isn't the way we want it, but let's just keep these colors the way they are, this gradient, and this is saying that all the shadow areas, the dark pixels, are going to be red. All the light pixels are going to be blue. You remember his top was white or light coloured, and his skin tones were quite dark. And then all the mid-tones in betweens are going to be green. And of course there was a bit of greenery in there, so that's why I chose this particular colour range, but you can choose any colour range to give you an effect. So we're going to do that one, but of course rather than, we're not leaving it like that. If we bring down the opacity of this layer, this adjustment layer, but here or in the layers palette, let's do it here because you can see it live then. and bring it right down so you can see the original image there. That's the original image, and if you take it back to it originally, that's what it is. But if we pump it up a little bit, it brings in a color grade, and you might think, well, do I want that? Let me just in fact, let me come out of that and go back to the layers palette, and it shows you with the color gradient map color grade on it for that across the whole image. You particularly see it on his temples there with the green around the in the midtones, and a little bit on the beard. But that's a bit like the Matrix one. It's got a green element to it, but the dark areas, remember, it was red, so there's more red in the dark areas in those areas there. Okay, and the light has got a bit of blue in it, although you can't tell. And if we disable that, that's the original, and that's the color grade on it. That's the original, that's the color grade. Now we can go back and double click any time and say, well, what if we give it a different color grade? Instead of having the middle one green, just click that middle node, then click the color swatch and say, well, maybe we don't want it to be green. We want to perhaps give it a yellow feel to it, or an orange. Let's go for orange. Okay, so now the mid-tones are all orange. So we've got now no green there, but more orange. That brings out the corn, the wheat, sorry, in the background. And again, we might want to change the opacity. That's too strong. Bring it down. It's typically between 20 and 25%. Tends to work quite well. Okay, so that's just two end results of a color grade on an existing image. Okay, so let's go to a different photograph. Let's go for this one. Okay, so that's a very oldie worldy water wheel. If you zoom in, you can just see it's a little bit unusual. Again in Pakistan. So again, I'm going to duplicate the layer just to punch up the existing colors and change the blend mode. I'm going to give it on overlay, but bring the opacity right down so it's subtle but effective. Okay, I'm fine with that. Now if you just go back to adjustment layers, and we want gradient map again, let's go for this one, this ultraviolet, something different. Okay, let's put this over here. Now this is saying that the dark pixels in the image are going to be very, very dark purple. It's almost black, fades through to purple, and then white. And what does that look like? So again, if we change the opacity down, so we need to bring the opacity down. Say, actually, this one wouldn't work so well at 20%. It might work better at about 40%. So we could leave it at that and say, yeah, I'm happy with that. Gives it a bit of a purple wash to it. And of course, if this was a sequence of pictures, an album of pictures, or indeed video, then if they all match, then it helps to unify the story. Now, of course, because each of these adjustment layers has a mask attached to it, if we wanted to use a paintbrush, paint with black, let's change that brush first of all. Yeah, I was using a prior brush there. Let's just change the brush. That, you can still mask out the effect in a given part of the image. So you might say, I don't want it on this wall, I just want it in the sky area. So like before on the other videos, what you're doing is you are masking out the effect in a given part. Of course, you can still do all of that, but primarily with color grading, it tends to be used across the whole image, not just across part of an image. But that doesn't mean that you can't experiment and do that. So I'm just going to undo that, just so that we're back to where we were. Okay, let's put on a different color grade to what we've got there. I'm just going to delete that layer, and I'm going to add a different adjustment layer, Let's go for, it doesn't matter which one it is because I'm going to change this drastically now. So click on the red node. So what I'm saying is that the black dark pixels I'm going to make into blue, and the light pixels, the light areas, I'm not going to make blue. I'm going to make them into sort of a aquamarine color. And then the midtones, I definitely don't want green. I want to make those into, let's say, yellow. Okay, and just see how that works. A certain knowledge of color theory and complementary colors helps, but of course it's a personal choice. And at any point, if you think, well, what happens if I reverse the colors? That's what happens. Reverse them back again. You could try that, but you could do them actually once you've reduce the effect, and let's have it there, quite like that there, and then reverse it and see what it, oh no, don't like that, much better that way. Okay, so it doesn't hurt to reverse it just to see what it looks like. Okay, so that's a color grade on that image, so it's different to what we had there, and we tried a couple there, and let's do one more on this one. And I'm actually going to make a big difference to this image initially because it's a little bit dark and it's a little bit lacks contrast. So I'm going to punch it up a bit, but not have it at full strength. I'm just going to reduce the strength of it by bringing the opacity down because it's a little bit bright up here. So I'm just going to bring that down. Okay, happy with that. So now we're going to add a color grade or an adjustment layer, a gradient map again. Again, doesn't matter where you start as long as you know that you can change it. So I'm going to change this. So I'm going to say that the dark pixels are going to be a sort of a maroon color, and then the light pixels are going to be a very, very light yellow, faint yellow, almost cream, and then the midtones are going to be a type of orange, but more of slightly fainter orange. So it really gives you that sort of old world sepia tone effect once we've reduced down the opacity of this adjustment layer. So again, if we bring it all the way back, that takes us to the original image, just bring it up until you notice that here it's clearly going more than 20-25%. It works actually at 50%, I would think. And you might push it a bit more, but okay, 50. And to me, again, because there's nothing in that image that gives it away that this was shot in the year 2000 and something, which it was. And so therefore, this image could easily, once you've maybe degraded it or added some digital noise or some film grain type of effect or scratches, this could easily pass off as a photograph from 50 years ago, although it being colour, less likely, certainly 40 years ago, and it's then in keeping with the subject, the content of the photograph. So that's a way of color grading. And of course, if you wanted to see a before and after, just disable that layer, see what it looks like, and that's it. So thank you for watching. I hope that's been useful and understanding of color grading, but also just using one tool, the gradient map, to add a gradient over an image which affects the dark pixels, the shadow areas, the highlight areas, and the midtones in different ways using different color washes. So do have a go, do give us some feedback, do appreciate the video by liking it if indeed you found it useful. Any comments would be greatly useful as well and appreciated. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you are a regular viewer, what are you waiting for? It only takes 2 seconds, costs nothing, and it certainly helps me and it helps the channel to reach a wider audience. So the more subscribers we get, the better it is for this ongoing series of video tutorials for Affinity Photo. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.